They want the bigger war. Now, as we've talked previously, I don't think we can win the bigger war. But they are very confident. They're so confident that they can't imagine not winning it. So,
Well,
so
if Iran does come in, and maybe even Jordan, the other nations, and it stays conventional, doesn't go nuclear, could we win that? You know, we got
no,
carriers there, we've got the ground troops massing now in Jordan. So I imagine they're thinking that they could keep this conventional and we could prevail. Is that realistic?
well, that's what they think. No, it's not. It's not. It's not realistic.
Because
And, well, uh, once that starts, you can expect all our bases to be gone. I mean, if Hezbollah and Iran have got 200,000 or 300,000 high explosive, very fast missiles, some of them traveling at Mach 9 or 10, our fleet's gone, all our bases are gone, all the Israeli cities are gone, and it just happens in a few minutes. It's just a few minutes. And then who's supplying the 101st Airborne Division? Ships are gone. Furthermore, the 101st Airborne Division, in my opinion, is as good as they may be. They're no match for Hezbollah. This is a much larger force, Hezbollah. They're very hardened. They're hardened troops, combat experience, and they're full of hate. They've had enough. They're motivated. Well, what's motivating the 101st Airborne Division? They're not defending America. They're fighting for Israel. And we already had a situation where some of the Israeli troops, when Netanyahu was trying to evade his legal problems by passing a law or claiming executive authority, that the courts had no authority over the prime minister.
yeah.
We had whole big sections of the military say, well, we're not coming to work. We're not fighting for you.
That's right. Yeah.
So there's don't understand that there's a lot of opposition inside Israel on the part of Israeli Jews.
Yeah.
There's a huge opposition to the way the Israeli government has treated the Palestinians. You know, just a few days ago, there was this massive Jewish protests against the war against Hamas. They occupied the U.S. Capitol.
Yeah.
This happened just a few days ago. You remember this woman, this rabbi, it's a Jewish rabbi. It's Jews, the Jews for Peace, and another organization I think called If Not Now. These are the American Jewish peace organizations. They're totally against what Israel is doing. They occupied the Capitol inside, sat down. They had a sit down, occupation of the Capitol. They didn't get arrested for an insurrection, but so there are people don't understand that Zionists don't speak for all Israelis. They don't speak for all Jews.
Right.
And the Jews have their own silent majority. The unorganized people are always silent.
Yeah.
Been
An Israeli newspaper ran an editorial blaming Netanyahu directly for causing the outbreak of this war because of the way Israel and Netanyahu's policies have been treating the Palestinians.
right.
It was a Israeli newspaper.
Yeah, well, the Israeli newspaper Haaretz,
Yeah,
it holds the Israeli government accountable in a way that no Western newspaper holds not just Israel accountable, but their own governments accountable. And it's a very objective paper. It's an honest. It's a real newspaper. We don't have anything like it here.
So getting back to the scenario, Paul, if if they provoke the Arab nations enough and they go all out and they wipe out our troops and take out our ships, then what happens?
Well, then the question is, can the United States accept defeat? Or the neocon, well, maybe the neocons will get cleared out. But the neocons, I don't think, can accept defeat, and they'll be arguing we have to push the button.
So go nuclear.
So you see, that part of the world is so far away from the supply back here, or even from Europe. And so we are overextended to be there. And they're not overextended. They're on their own territory. The Arabs and the Iranians, they're not overextended. We are. And so if this really breaks into the scenario that I think the neocons and Netanyahu intend, which is a wide war that lets us get rid of, in their minds, Syria and Iran. Then we are in the vulnerable position because the ships are sitting there and they're sitting ducks. They can't avoid those missiles. They're just not. They have no protection against it. And the bases that we have all around in there, they're sitting ducks. Now, we're not talking about 2 or 3 missiles or 30 or 40. We're talking about 200,000. Well, I don't know what the explosive power of one of the missiles is, but time you multiply it by 200,000, you're probably on the level of a nuke.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's separated, it's scattered, but you can see there would be very little functionable. And if they hit how many cities are there in Israel? Not many. It's a tiny place. And they hit those cities, and they hit the nuclear storage area, or what's believed to be Israel's nuclear storage area. Israel's gone. It's just gone. It's just total chaos. It's not no communications. There's nothing. No power, and so it's not a kind of situation that a military would like to find itself in. And I'm kind of surprised that our military went along with it.
You were saying, Paul, in your article that if they don't provoke an all-out war with the surrounding nations of Israel, what they plan on doing is driving all the Palestinians out of Gaza and perhaps even the West Bank settlements. The settlements have taken over the West Bank. The Palestinians have little spots left. Drive them all out into the Sinai Peninsula.
Yeah, the Israelis are already talking about this.
Yeah.
I watched a video today of an Israeli describing that they don't need to invade, but they can achieve even more just by bombing and driving them. See, they've already driven. They already got 1.4 million Palestinians in Gaza displaced.
Yeah.
That's more than half the population is already displaced. And he described it that what the goal is that they drive them into Egypt, into the Sinai, and they'll put up tent cities for them and provide water and food, and they become refugees in the Sinai. And
without Egypt's permission.
Well, or what's Egypt going to do about it? I mean, they're going to, otherwise Egypt will be accused of participating in the genocide of the Palestinians by keeping them in there, more people, smaller area, bomb. So I don't think Egypt has, they'll have to go along with it. and they have the force not to anyhow. So, and they're already talking about this. And I watched this video. And in fact, I was going to publish my article in the morning and also post that video of the Israelis talking about Plan B, which is to drive the Palestinians out of Gaza, all of them, out of Gaza, and relocate them in tent cities in the Sinai. Now, I'm not saying this. That's what the Israelis were saying.
Yeah.
And tomorrow I will post it. And it's a very long thing, and I don't know how far down in it that particular video is, but there's all kinds of information of all the kinds of schemes that can substitute for the invasion. But the question then is, you see that so far, right now, the trigger that is supposed to bring in Hamas and Iran is Israeli invasion of Gaza.
Right.
Well, so far, Biden has blocked that. There hasn't been this invasion. And so the question is, if the invasion doesn't happen, or Iran and Hezbollah can, will they accept that instead of invading and killing them, you bomb them and kill them and drive them out of Gaza? I mean, the trigger, in other words, may also be Plan B. In other words, Iran and Hezbollah may say, well, there's no difference. If we consider this bombing and driving them out of Gaza into the Sinai the same as an invasion. So the trigger could very easily change because Israel is changing how they're going to go about it under pressure from Biden. I think that this was an Israeli neocon plot to reopen the Middle East wars, because they were going along fine until Putin came in there and stopped it. That stopped. I mean, how are you going to have it with the Russian Air Force there and the Russian naval base? Remember, he was also reinforcing the naval base. They were sending more ships. And they had these air defense systems they were putting in, and it became clear to Obama that you couldn't invade. And we kept trying to fight them with the CIA's mercenaries, but they were defeated, the CIA's mercenaries. So now's a chance to reopen it. And I'm sure that the official reason given to Biden for sending the aircraft carriers and the 101st Airborne Division is to protect Israel. We have to protect Israel. We have to protect. So this is the official reason, I'm sure, but it's not the real reason. The real reason is to be there. So if Iran and Hezbollah take the bait and go into Israel, we now have an excuse to go into Iran and Syria. And that's, I think, and as far as I can tell, the forces we're seeing there continue to be beefed up.
Yeah.
And so Israel doesn't need all of those forces to defeat Hamas. They don't need our 4 carrier task force, American Airborne Divisions, Marines, Special Forces. If it takes that to defeat Hamas, you damn sure better leave Hamas alone. So anyhow, that's my speculation. It makes sense. It ties things together. No one has ever explained what 9/11 was really about. I did. I said it's so we could go into the Middle East. And where are the rest of the terrorist events? We're fighting a war on terror. Where are the terrorists? Saddam Hussein, Assad, Iran? Well, they're not doing anything. Where are the terrorists? Where are the terrorist events in the United States? We had one. one that they claimed. I mean, it was a terrorist, but it wasn't done by the Muslims. So it makes sense. 9/11 was to start what the neocons have in their own publicly available writings, take out the opponents of Israel in the Middle East. They name the countries. You can find Nolan Podhoretz. He was the editor of commentary. You can find his article. I've got it somewhere, but a lot of my stuff's packed up. It'd take me forever to find it. It used to be you could go to a library and they had all this stuff. Now if it exists, it's online.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you can see it's just what they say they're going to do is exactly what happened. And then they got stopped. They had we were ready to invade Syria. We had the false flag that we blamed on Assad. He used chemical weapons. Everybody knows they weren't Assad's chemical weapons, but nobody can contradict the narrative. So we were ready to go, and then we woke up in the morning, and there was the Russian Air Force. That was the one proactive thing Putin did. He's usually reactive. Well, here he was proactive. He was ahead of the game, and it stopped the war. I wish he would do that more often. There'd be less wars. But so that's what this is all about. This gets Netanyahu out of his legal and political problems, makes him a national hero, and it gives the neoconservatives who run the government, our foreign policy, it gives them the excuse to reopen the Middle Eastern wars, and this time it'd be Syria and Iran, and that's my explanation of it. It's speculative, but it all fits together. It makes sense. It makes sense out of the whole last 20 years. It makes complete sense out of it. It makes sense out of this. I mean, it's impossible to believe that Israel would build a security barrier that can be so easily defeated. What would be the purpose of the barrier? None. So why don't you just string some barbed wire? It'd been a lot cheaper. So this barrier was not defeated. It was turned off. It had to be. If you try to disable it from outside the system, the alarms go off. That's why it's called fail-safe. And
observers that are watching it all the time from Israeli soil, if anything comes through that's not supposed to, they immediately know about it. They usually. So where were they? And Israelis were asking that. Where were the security forces?
Well, I quoted two former Mossad agents or Israeli intelligence agents. I forget which they were. One was a woman, one was a man, and one of them was a former commander of part of the barrier. Yeah. He said, "Look, this is nonsense. Not even a fox can get through."
Yeah.
And my understanding is that barrier is they've got towers and automatic machine guns that automatically go off when they detect motion approaching.
Yeah, isn't there a 1,000-foot barrier before they even get to the fence?
I don't know, but you can't get close enough to the barrier for the farmers to work their fields because they get shot down in fields.
Yeah.
So it's nonsense. It's nonsense. Just like, the Air Force can't get planes off to the ground to intercept. Yeah. I mean, how can you denigrate your own Air Force like that? I mean, that says they're incompetent. So why aren't all the generals fired? But nothing happens to them. Yeah. And traffic control can't find the planes on the what? Well, how is that? And when nothing works that can't fail to that extent, they're not letting it work. And if we were that vulnerable, then we wouldn't still be here. And if it was that easier to defeat the Israeli barrier, The Hamas have been doing it for years and years and years. It happened every week.
Yeah. Like you say, it isn't logical. It doesn't make sense.
It's not. It doesn't make any sense. And yet people sit there and they believe this crap. I mean, it's mind blowing. And
Yeah.
people can be so stupid. They're so insouciant, so unaware.
Well, but Paul, that's reinforced by the Western media, the American media especially, which I've been saying for years. Like since this broke out, the war broke out, they haven't had on Fox, which is supposed to go off the narrative and really tell you how it is. There's been no Palestinian side presented, just the Israeli line repeated endlessly and reinforced. CNN, I'll have to give them credit because they're usually very one-sided, but which they still are for Israel. But at least they let some of the Palestinians talk about what's going on from their perspective. So at least they're showing some of that. But years ago, I can remember they'd have Palestinian spokespeople on the networks being interviewed to give their side of it. You don't see that anymore. It's only the Israeli spokespeople that are on the air, and people don't even realize that it wasn't always that way. The media is so stacked, so one-sided, so much doesn't deviate from the narrative. It just goes along with it and reinforces all of this rather than opening things up to proper questioning.
Yeah, and I can say one thing though about that. The Democrats, if you notice, they're less pro-war than the Republicans. And why is that? Because the Democrats' diversity, multicultural, open borders have brought in so many Muslims.
Right.
They brought them into the Democrat Party, and they have shaped the party, and the party is in a position now where it can't refuse to listen to them.
Right.
Whereas the Republicans, they've only got one. It's a woman, and they're talking about expelling her from the party because she said something nice about the Palestinians. So the Republicans aren't burdened. They're not part of the open borders, diversity, multicultural program. They don't have all those people. They don't have them voting for them. They don't have them as members of Congress. They don't have them appointed in important positions. As you know, we talked recently about the conflict within the State Department between the Arabs and the Jews.
Yeah.
Didn't we the other day? I think we did. There's a big battle in the State Department over our policy because all of the Arabs who have gotten high-level appointments from diversity and all that, and then the Jews, they don't see eye to eye. So the State Department can't come together. And but the Republicans are bothered by this. They don't have that problem because they didn't, they're not part of the diversity multicultural world. And they've got one person who's, balanced, and they want to get rid of her.
Another thing that the media is doing, they're equating.
Well, let me finish this first. See, what this means is the media is for the Democrats.
Yeah.
But if the Democrats are having constraints on being too gung-ho Israel, the media sees that and they start. I told you about the big demonstration the Jews for Peace had in the Capitol.
Right.
That was in CNN. It was covered very well, very honestly. I was surprised. I was stunned to see this in CNN. And then it dawned on me, well, they have to, because the Democrats, this is part of them now,
Yeah.
these people. And I also want to point out that who were the only people speaking out for peace? It was the Jews. It was these Jews in these peace groups not a member of the House or the Senate or the Biden administration. They're not speaking for peace. It was the Jews.
Yeah.
So this shows the Jews don't even, they're not Zionist. A lot of them are not Zionist.
Yeah.
People forget Netanyahu is a minority candidate.
Yeah.
He's only in power because he cobbled together a coalition out of extreme right-wing groups. There's a lot of opposition in Israel to the Israeli government, far more than there is in the U.S. Congress.
Yeah.
And we can't forget this. You see, the term "the Jews" is a convention, but there's no such thing. They're Zionist and they're non-Zionist. And the Orthodox Jews, as far as I can tell, they won't even be in the same room with the Zionists. So they are a different, they are people who are different. And a lot of them have a very strong sense of justice and the moral sense. And the Zionists have an agenda, and nothing gets in the way of the agenda. And the moral ones, like this rabbi leading the peace movement, she just can't stand Zionists. So it could well be this thing is going to fall apart, that the Democrats are going to catch on, like some of them must have caught on because somebody is talking to Biden. And he is acting as a restraint. And Putin is clearly acting as a restraint. So that kind of makes it harder for the neocons to have a false flag, because people are going to say, well, wait a minute. Now, Biden has them restrained and Putin has them restrained. Why a false flag? I mean, why would they do this? False flag. Somebody did it. In other words, it becomes too risky of a false flag because the two groups in opposition are being restrained. And that kind of makes it difficult to have a false flag. It's just like when the Americans and the Soviets in the Cold War were talking to each other and making arms reduction agreements, and everybody was working to tone things down so no more Cuban Missile Crises. It would have been hard for anybody to fall for a false alarm of incoming missiles.
Yeah.
But today with this, false alarm can be believed.
Yeah.
So my point is that if both sides are being restrained, Putin and Biden on one side, then it's hard for the neocons to have the false flag. So all of this could possibly play out in a way that's not so disastrous. And what they'll do about Palestine, I don't know. But I think they'll have to do something, because when they've left it for so long that Israel's accustomed just doing whatever it wants. And it does a little bit and then it stops. And then because people get upset, it does a little bit more and then it stops because people get upset. But over time, if you look at the map, Palestine has shrunk away almost to nothing. That is the part of Palestine that is Palestinian.
Yeah.
There's very, very little of it left. And so it's hard to have a two-state solution.
Yeah, where would they put it? I mean, they'd have to kick Jews out of the settlements to create a Palestinian state, right?
They would have to recreate the West Bank, which has been almost completely occupied by the settlers.
Yeah.
In other words, they'd have a civil war. Israel would have to have a civil war. There'd be Israelis fighting the Israelis. And they would have to have, if they kept Gaza, they'd have to have some corridor like the Danzig corridor in Poland pre-World War II. They would have to have some way of connecting the two separate entities.
Yeah.
And so it's a very unstable type of a two-state solution. I mean, the logical thing would just be to make one country and have everybody citizens. They could call it Israel-Palestine. And everybody, the Palestinians and the Israelis would all be equal. And then they would, I guess, have a two-party system. But I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. It's the problem. You see, for years, nobody wanted to do anything about it.
Yeah.
So now it's hard to do anything.
Yeah.
And the Israelis have gotten away with everything for so long, they expect to continue to get away with it. So they've got very little incentive to do anything other than grab all of Palestine. So it's even if the current situation calms down, the problem hadn't gone away.
Right.
It'll come back. It'll resurface something else. And
yeah, they're already have created a new generation of new terrorists because of what's happening now. And there's going to be more resentment, more anger into a new generation of Palestinians. Like I've said before, when they create that kind of a situation, it is a breeding ground for extremists and radicals. When Israel was set up in 1948, what did they expect other than what's been happening?
right, that's right. And why did the rest of the world expect anything different?
Yeah.
I think all the peace talks, everybody knows it's a hoax. It's just a way of stopping that crisis for that minute.
Well, Paul, wrapping it up now, it seems like your conclusion is if Iran doesn't take the bait and Hezbollah is restrained, the way Israel is going to solve this problem is to drive the remaining Palestinians out of Gaza, displace them, and perhaps push them into the surrounding countries that they've been pushed into before, and maybe the Sinai Peninsula, and that would be their final solution.
Well, based on what Israelis are saying now, yeah, they discuss a tent city that they will construct in the Sinai, and that they will have water and food there, and a humanitarian corridor for the Palestinians to exit Gaza. In other words, there won't be any Palestinians left in Gaza. They'll move into these tent cities. Now, if being there permanently is not possible or plausible, then the various countries will be looking to move them into other countries, into refugee camps. As we've talked before, Lebanon has these camps. They've got a couple of generations of Palestinians born in these refugee camps. They also exist in Jordan, I think. They certainly did. Maybe they're all now integrated into the Jordanian population. I just don't know. I don't know that Egypt wants 2 million Palestinians in Egypt. Whether the Europeans will all feel guilty and all agree to take a portion of them, we'll certainly get a portion of them. So we may be trying to get South Americans to take them. And, you just can't tell, but I don't think that's going to happen, because I think the Iranians and Hezbollah will see this the same as an invasion. And they'll just say, well, it's the same thing. And that's a trigger, just like the invasion. And so we're coming in. So I think it just has to stop. Somebody's got to stop it. And that can only be done if the United States government tells Israel, stop it right now. We're not going to protect you. There's no more money, no more weapons. Stop now or else. Or, as I think I've said before, the Russians, the Chinese, and the Iranians, you've got to stand up and say, this is a threat. Stop it or else. And either of those, I think, can stop it. Because nobody's going to say, okay, let's kill ourselves so we can get rid of Hamas. It's not going to happen. Even the neoconservatives, as crazy and insane as they are, they're not going to say, okay, let's have a nuclear war if they won't let us destroy Hamas and Palestine. I just don't, our military is just going to say no. We don't. So I think it takes that kind of force. And Putin tries to imply it without saying it. Like he said, this is not a threat. But, our planes are patrolling and they have the Kinzhal hypersonic missiles that can be there in a few seconds or a few minutes, 6 minutes or 4 minutes, something like that, 400 seconds. And so that's the way of telling them that you better not attack Syria. But instead of saying this is not a threat, he should have said this is a threat.
Well, Netanyahu said just yesterday that if Hezbollah starts attacking in force, that he will bomb Syria back into the Stone Age. So he's still increasing the rhetoric.
Who said that?
Netanyahu.
Yeah. Well, he wouldn't be able to if the Russians take the constraints off. You see that Putin is so cautious. I think he's the cause of a lot of the trouble. His caution, because people don't take him seriously.
Yeah.
He's permitted the Iranians to have the S-300 Russian air defense system. That can take out the Israeli planes. It can take out our planes. But he won't let the Syrians use it against the Israeli and American planes. So Israel can continue to fly in and attack Syrian territory. And the other day, we used our planes and attacked Syrian territory.
Right.
And the only reason we can do that is Putin won't let the Syrians use the S-300s, which would knock the planes out of the sky just like that. Boom, 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 boom. But there wouldn't be any more Israeli planes or any American planes. But he won't let them use it because, that's a confrontation. He's trying to avoid these confrontations because he keeps hoping all this can somehow be calmed down. And I can see that's a responsible statesman's approach. That's the way a statesman would approach something. Let's don't make it worse. And he has to be respected for that. But on the other side, he's got to realize that this actually encourages what he's trying to avoid, because they say there's no cost to us. We can attack them. But if this war breaks loose, that restraint will come off. And so Netanyahu tries to bomb him, he's going to lose his whole air force. And if the Russians were to move in the S-400, the S-500, there wouldn't be an American or Israeli plane within 1,000 miles. So it's that's part of the miscalculation, is that Putin does everything to avoid worsening the situation, and it becomes counterproductive because we think he ain't going to do anything, and so we get worse and worse. And then he has to do something, and when the last thing, it basically just takes us out. And then we're humiliated, and we've defeated, and we lost our Air Force, we lost all our carriers, and then things really get emotional and crazy, and everybody's screaming, "Nuke the Russians!" and there it goes. So that's why this is so dangerous. And it's why it's so irresponsible to come up with plots like this. But it shows the sort of determination of the neocons and Netanyahu for Israeli expansion. I mean, they're determined. And it's been, like I said, it's been going on, I think, since 1947. And now it's reached a real dangerous place because the Arabs now are armed for the first time. They have modern weapons. They're as good as ours. The Russians have better weapons. So do the Chinese. And so the thing is primed for a real explosion. When all this started, the Arabs didn't have any weapons to speak. I mean, they didn't really have competent military capabilities. That's changed. And so that's why that's one of the whys that it's so dangerous for the whole world. And I'm just glad that someone reached Biden. I think this would have already blown up, you know?
No.
I'm glad that Putin is cautious and responsible and is trying to keep this calm. But at some point, he'll have to, if he's not succeeding, he can't go 8 years like he did in Donbass and give the thing 8 years to develop against him while he was being cautious. He'll have to do something to stop it while it can still be stopped. And I still think it takes very decisive words that people can't say, oh, they don't mean it.
Yeah.
It has to be something that's like, by God, they mean it. And that's why I think it takes him, the Chinese president, the Iranian, they all get up together and say, no more. Yeah, that's the end. No more. It's too risky. We're not going to let you have the initiative. If it doesn't stop, you're gone. And that would stop it. Or, as I said, Biden has got to tell the Israelis, stop it. It's too risky. We won't have your backs. We're not giving you any money, no weapons. You'll be isolated. We're no longer going to protect you in the UN. You'll be isolated. We're going to make APAC and ADL register as foreign agents. Well, I think this would stop it. And nobody wants to take those costs, which are very small compared to an atomic war, a nuclear war. The cost of nuclear war overwhelm all those costs many million times. And so it's going to take leadership. And I was surprised to see this type of leadership from Biden. I must say, it surprised me. And I'm not surprised at Putin, but I'm surprised at Biden. And I'm surprised that the Democrats are not the warmongers that the Republicans are. You know, who are the warmongers? You know, it's Lindsey Graham, Donald Trump, Mike Thompson. Is that the new speaker, Mike Thompson? Yeah. These are the warmongers. And Nikki Haley. It's not Chuck Schumer and Bernie Sanders. It's not them.
Yeah.
This is kind of surprising, and so I'm beginning to realize that, you know, after all, the Democrats do have some good qualities.
Just my
Yeah, it's kind of a strange position, and so, but I don't know what's going to happen. I can't tell you. I think I've given a very good speculative framework through which to view this and watch it. And so the test is the framework I give exactly the way it plays out? And if so, then I was right.
We'll see. No, I mean, your analysis is always in depth, and it comes from the vast experience you've had over decades. I mean, you're with the government, you've kept your eye on things, so it's far superior to the usual uh, digest of opinion that we get. So,
Well, thank you for saying that. I think the reason is I'm not on either side. I'm not emotionally involved.
right, right.
Trying to be objective and understand what's going on.
And again, as I've said,
Most analysts they've got a dog in the fight.
right, right.
And so their understanding tends to go in a way that they're already committed
Yeah,
to bear that out. But I'm not committed to anything but trying to understand objectively
yeah,
what is going on, not my emotion or my preference, or I'm not in this fight.
yeah,
I'm just analyzing it, trying to understand it, offer an explanation, possibly affecting the way the people carrying the fight on think. So if they say, hey, wait a minute, we didn't realize all these threats and dangers, and it's not worth it. That's the reason I do it. Is my hope is that other people, if you show them something, they might say, oh, didn't know that. I see that could happen. And so that's the only reason I'm doing this. I'm not a Russian agent. I'm not a Mossad agent. I'm not a Democrat, Republican. I'm not working for anybody, and I don't have any bosses. I don't have any advertisers.
you're not a Putin's agent, as you've been accused of a few times, right?
Yeah, I'm not a Putin agent. I'm not anybody's agent, and now that makes people like George W. Bush mad. You're with us or you're against us.
Yeah, right.
I don't see it that way. I'm with the truth. I'm with the truth. When I got the International Journalism Award from the Press Club of Mexico, I had to go down and give a speech, and the room it was full of journalists, and it was full of the Russian government, the Mexican government officials, including the ministry, the police, and all that. And I said, look, and at that time, something like 50 Mexican journalists had been killed, assassinated, because they didn't tell the story the way the authorities wanted them to. And I made reference to that, and I said, that we're not Mexicans or Americans. It's that our country is truth. We stand for truth. The whole contingent of journalists stood up, clapped and clapped and clapped and clapped and clapped, and all the police people were scowling. And I got to thinking, am I going to get killed on the way to the airport? Well, that's my opinion. It doesn't mean I have the truth, but I try to find it.
And you try to be objective. Objectivity is no longer valued or sought or encouraged. That everybody has an agenda. Most of the media, that they are, as I've repeatedly said, propagandists and cheerleaders for one side or the other.
Yeah, and agendas are immune to facts.
Yeah, exactly. Good note to end it on. Paul Craig Roberts, thanks once again for being with us. And we'll be talking again as the situation continues and we see how it does play out. Paul, thank you.
Thank you, Larry. I look forward to being on your program the next time.